Hi, I'm Mike Ignatowski, the creator of the GreenFox baseball spreadsheet. In May of 2023, I released the first version of GreenFox to the public, which was more than 2 years ago. And in that time, I've put out and published many updates to the spreadsheet. I'm not exactly sure how many, but I know over 20. And within those updates, many significant features have been added to the spreadsheet, to the point that I think now is a good time, and maybe it's even a little overdue, to provide some overview videos that cover the general functionality of the spreadsheet. Not every feature, but it will cover the majority of the features and give new users as well as existing users a good idea of what the spreadsheet can do, how it does it, and how it could maybe help them out with their baseball project. So this will be a series of 3 videos to cover all of that functionality. Before we dig into the spreadsheet details, I just want to say the driving force behind the creation of GreenFox was all about the stats. People that like tabletop baseball games in general love stats. That's the blessing and the curse. Nobody likes painstakingly generating the stats after each game or compiling them and keeping track of them and the time it takes to do it. That's probably the biggest reason people don't finish the projects they start, because the stats drag them down. So that's the problem that GreenFox is trying to solve. It can take a baseball score sheet and automatically compute the game stats from it, and then with the click of a button, remember or record those stats and compile them for season stats or cumulative stats for teams and players, and track standings for your league and your teams, all basically at the click of a button. That's the reason I created GreenFox. So let's get into a little more of the, I guess you'd say, the details of the GreenFox baseball spreadsheet. And let's answer some basic questions of, what is it, what does it do, and why. While I review the many features and capabilities of the spreadsheet, it'll be up to you to kind of take those into account and weigh them and decide whether it's something that could benefit you in your baseball project and how you might take advantage of what GreenFox can do. So let's first kind of talk about what it is. GreenFox is an Excel spreadsheet that I've programmed to assist the tabletop baseball gamer community, mainly card and dice players, but not exclusively. That was I would say, the target audience for the spreadsheet, but it isn't limited to that. And this just kind of bullet point lists some of the main features of it, that it has this intelligent score sheet, and it has the ability to compute game stats automatically from the score sheet, as well as then track cumulative or season stats for all players and teams that have been set up in a GreenFox league, which is a very flexible league framework to support many different types of projects. And we'll get into more of those later, what some of those projects are. It's not limited to any specific tabletop baseball game, but really will support all tabletop baseball games as long as they follow the standard baseball rules. It's written in Excel, but you don't have to be an Excel expert. And I would probably say it doesn't really work like a typical Excel spreadsheet in many ways. It looks and works more like, I would say, a computer program than a spreadsheet in many of its features. But it does require a full version of Excel to work. It doesn't work on other spreadsheets like Google Sheets. Here are a few fun facts about GreenFox. It was released in May of 2023. There have been many updates to it since that initial release. And in those updates, there have been, I would say many significant features. It's almost, I don't know if I'd say it's unrecognizable, but it's gotten a significant facelift since it first appeared to the public in May of 2023. And it is actively supported and developed by myself, and I plan to keep publishing and releasing updates both as the Major League Baseball seasons complete, so there's more data for each season, but also other features independent of just the new season stats. GreenFox has a Facebook group that I've created. It has over 850 members as of September of 2025. That's a great place to ask questions, as well as the really only place you're going to be able to get the newest version of the spreadsheet and the supporting files for the spreadsheet. I've created a YouTube playlist that has many instructional videos, and I try to put one out with each release that covers the new features of the releases, as well as several other videos. Those are probably the best teachers, other than somebody who already knows it, that you can learn from firsthand. GreenFox is the parent spreadsheet to Blue Links, which is a hockey spreadsheet that I released in 2025. So if you're familiar with one, many parts of these two spreadsheets look familiar because they basically share a lot of components. The GreenFox spreadsheet was programmed and written using Microsoft's Visual Basic for Applications programming language called VBA, which is a very convenient and powerful programming language when it comes to Excel. It's not a great programming language for a lot of other things, but when it comes to programming Excel, it's very, very powerful. And it has a lot of lines of code in there because it's taken me a lot of hours to create it, but it's something I've really enjoyed doing. So let's get into more of the details now of some of the features. I think of GreenFox as having three main components. It has a score sheet, it has league setup and configuration components, and it has league operation components. And I list the score sheet here first, even though it's maybe should be listed second here, because really you typically will set up your league first, then start playing your games using the score sheet, and then kind of keep track of your league using the league operation components. But I'm going to list the score sheet here first because that's really the what I would call the straw that stirs the drink of this whole thing is the score sheet, because that's where the stats come from. But let's look at this thing overall. And before we even get to any of these, I want to talk about something overall, which is the GreenFox worksheets. And worksheets in Excel is kind of synonymous with the word tab or sheet. So I may say any of those three words, but they really all mean the same thing. And these worksheets or tabs in Excel are really just a nice way to keep track of different types of information within one spreadsheet workbook or file. And they're listed within an Excel workbook or an Excel spreadsheet at the bottom. And in GreenFox, I've color-coded them kind of in groups. So you can kind of see GreenFox has many sheets, has over 20 of them, and they're somewhat named so that you can understand what they are. Some are a little cryptic, but when I refer to sheets, tabs, or worksheets, they're all referring to these different areas of the spreadsheet that contain different types of information. And to get around from one sheet to the next, you can always click on a sheet that you want to look at. But because there are so many sheets, most people's display or screen can't show all the sheets at once. So I created this little navigator that I call it. It's really a pop-up window, or I might refer to it as a form or a user form, but it's a convenient way to get from one worksheet to another without having to scroll and find what you're looking for. And when I create this navigator, you can see it has little tabs at the top. It has 6 tabs, and these tabs, each of them shows a list of worksheets that have a different color. And the color here matches the color on the bottom of the workbook. So that's how you kind of know what you're looking for. So there's main, which is the main ones you're going to use once you get started. But there are different league setup, has different ones. And within the league setup, I try to make these names, I'll say, easier to understand, because sometimes the actual worksheet is a little cryptic. But if you hover on these, it'll actually show you the names of the actual sheets. You can see here's the stats. There's 9 different stat sheets, and this tells what each one of them contains. So that, well, that's a little thing I made just to help users get to the right sheet within GreenFox. Once you've worked with it a little bit, you'll kind of know where things are, and you may or may not want to use it, but it can be helpful. Given that, now let's get to the score sheet, which I call the heartbeat of GreenFox, because again, that's where the stats come from, and really this spreadsheet, the reason it exists is all about stats. So here on the left, it's small because it's small to see here because the score sheet is a pretty large sheet. There's a lot going on here. So it's a score sheet. Here's the home team score sheet. Visitors on the top, home score sheet on the bottom, and here are the stats for the game. The visitors batting, visitor pitching, etc. So this is just kind of zoomed out so you can see the whole thing. Over here it's zoomed in on just, here you can see it's just the home team, but you can kind of get an idea of what the score sheet looks like when you can actually get close enough to see the contents of it. But basically, it's a bunch of large squares or blocks that have a lot of cells in them. So let's keep going here. And what I call each of these big squares, like one batter's plate appearance in an inning, I call a batter block, or a score sheet batter block. So I'll sometimes refer to it as SSBB, the score sheet batter block. And the score sheet batter block has 16 different cell areas. So you can see here, this is kind of showing these are the 16 cell areas, and this is a blown up version of those 16 cells, and it labels each one so that it kind of tells you what's in it. And here you can see how they're used. So in this example, Speedy Gonzalez got a single, that's the 1B. This SB means he stole second base, and the fact that it's colored in blue indicates that's an earned run that he scored. Here's a sacrifice bunt to the pitcher who's thrown out at first. Bugs Bunny struck out. Slowpoke Rodriguez hit a home run. And here this means 2 RBIs. Here's the RBI cell. So that means he had 2 RBIs. So that's the idea of kind of the building block of the score sheet is that score sheet batter block. And this is an example of the help sheet within GreenFox that, again, shows that same thing of the score sheet batter block layout, or you can think of it as a map. And this gives a thorough description of when you click in these cells, what they're for, how to use them. And in general, you can see it's kind of a baseball diamond with first, second, third, and home, and with the main result in the middle. I won't go through all these details here, but the idea is this will explain what these cells mean and how to use them. And we'll talk about quick score later. But you can see here on this help sheet, it also gives you a nice links to either email GreenFox support or go to the playlist of YouTube videos. This score sheet feature is the better result form. Again, when I say form, you can think of it as a pop-up window. But in Excel, they officially call them user forms. But they all mean the same kind of thing. And you can see that this user form is where you would indicate what happened to a batter during their plate appearance. They're kind of grouped by color here. So these are various outs. This positional detail is optional. So if you want to say they lined out, you could just click line out and then click OK. If you want to say they lined out to second, you'd click line out and second base and click OK. That just really makes the score sheet, I'll say, richer. There's a little more detail, but it has nothing to do with stats because GreenFox doesn't track fielding stats. But a lot of people use this just because you're trying to keep score. If you know they grounded out to short, you might want to write they grounded out to short. And here are the hits. There's some special things about how the runners advance. These little areas, here where it'll indicate if there's a runner on first, second, or third, how many outs there are. Here's where you could record a passed ball or wild pitch, these kind of special things. Errors, and then kind of complicated, I'll say complicated, but less common, but more complex scoring when you have a hit plus an error, those kind of things, or catcher interference. And this can indicate here if there's error on the left field or whatever position of how many base error was it. So that is the better result form that's near and dear to every GreenFox user's heart. Here is the score sheet help sheet, another part of the help sheet that just goes over all the details of this form. And don't let all these arrows and words scare you. Most of it's pretty logical and common sense once you get started. And you might just want to refer to it when you have kind of a stranger situation about how do you do a single and an error, or if you want your runners to advance 2 bases on a single or 1, or how do you handle a balk. So a lot of it is pretty natural. Also, I'll mention here, this is how this OK and toggle end of inning. This is a symbol that GreenFox uses a symbol in the score sheet to indicate who was the last batter of the inning, and that's how you indicate it here. The quick score feature is something that, if you saw a few slides ago, we mentioned it, but quick score is a 100% optional feature that you can turn on, or I'll say off, using one of the many game options. And we'll talk about the game options later in these videos. But quick score is really just kind of a shortcut way to efficiently, or I guess you can say efficiently, just a quicker way to keep score if you want to do it. And so here again, we're looking at this score sheet batter block key. And what we're looking at here, this is the help window. And the help window lets you view these cells 3 different ways. The primary, which we saw before, there's the primary and quick score, which shows kind of many of these cells have 2 different functions. And then if you just want to see the quick score feature, that's what this is. And what the quick score does is really just lets you record many of the common results in a score sheet without using that better result form. So if you think about it, let's just say if I want to record a strikeout, I first have to click to bring up this window or this form. Then I'll click strike out and then click OK. So that's 3 clicks. And that's not that that's bad. But if I wanted to use quick score, as long as this batter's batter block here is empty, totally empty, if I click this cell up here, which would be like this one right here, that would record a strikeout without even bringing up that batter result form. So it's definitely just kind of a shortcut. Many people, including myself, use a combination of the quick score and the batter result form because, first of all, this doesn't have all the results, so you can't just use quick score. But sometimes it is convenient for many common results to just use the quick score. One thing it doesn't have in quick score is it does not have any position details. So if you want to say ground out to short, you can't use quick score. So that's quick score. Some other features of the score sheet: it has these hover season stats. Again, you have to enable them if you want them. But what that does is once you've played a few games, you'll at the start of the game, it puts these little cell notes in that are indicated by these red triangles here. And then if you hover on a lineup name, it would show this pop-up window here, which would have some of their main season stats, including their current hitting streak. So that doesn't have all their stats, but it has a lot of the main categories. So it just gives you an idea if you want to hover on them and see how they're doing. That's what I call the hover stat feature is. Another feature is the special bat around inning, and that is when you have in your game where you have more than 9 batters bat in an inning. That's always extra excitement on your score sheet, depending on how you do it. But in the GreenFox, each inning has a kind of an overflow column next to it that's typically hidden, but you can reveal it when you need it if you bat around. I do think I need to thank John Turnbull for showing me this on a different spreadsheet that he had worked on, a different thing, and that's where I got this idea from. So thanks John. So that's a convenient way that GreenFox handles these innings. As long as you don't have more than 18 batters in an inning, you're okay. And you can see here this is showing that this here is the visitor score sheet, but this is saying if the home team batted around in their 5th inning, it would add the column to both teams' score sheet, but it would kind of blacken it in, or it colorizes it here so that you know that you shouldn't be using it, but that way it keeps everything in the same columns for the innings. And now it'll actually automatically detect when you've batted around, and it'll prompt you to say, hey, looks like you batted around, do you want to see the overflow inning? And that's what you typically would say yes, but you can always do it manually. That's batting around. Substitutions. This is another nice feature of the spreadsheet. And if you recall back when we were looking at that score sheet batter block, I guess maybe I should quickly look at that. You can see here, these areas on the edge are where you indicate where you want to bring in a substitute player. And depending on what type of sub you want, that depends where you want to click. Like if you click on the left edge here, that means you're going to bring in a pinch hitter. If you click on the right edge, you're going to bring in a pinch runner. And along the top, that's to bring in a relief pitcher. So when you do those things, that's when you get the substitution form or substitution pop-up window. And here you can see this is showing this for the Chicago Cubs, and it would list every player that's on the roster that's not currently in the game. And if they weren't a starter but have already been brought into the game in the lineup, like Don Landrum and Ellis Burton. You can see here they're grayed out so that you can't choose them because they've already been brought into the game. It'll also let you, has a button up here for the bullpen if you want to have a pitcher be either a pinch hitter or a pinch runner. So you can, if you click this, it would now list the pitchers that you could bring in. And over here is the form you get if you click the relief pitcher area, like this cell area at the top. That would bring up a window like this. And you can see here it also shows their positions, just like here in the substitute bench players, of whether they're primarily a starter reliever, but you can bring in whoever you want at any time you want. It doesn't enforce anything based on these pitcher roles. But this also, I'll mention here, these symbols here can indicate your left-handed pitchers if you have this game option turned on. Let's talk about some other features. These are called advanced features. I guess that's a good enough description, but one of these is called the put-out detail form, which allows the user to provide base runner put-out details. It's optional, but like in this scenario, I have Jim Rayhart getting thrown out by the right fielder when he was trying to go first to third on the single down here by Tom Haller. So here's the single by Tom Haller. And Jim Rayhart, if you just put single one base, he would be here. But you could click on third and mark him out at third base. But that doesn't really state here on the score sheet how he got out. So if you click up here, these top two cells, you can see right here, are both the put out details cell. Let me go back to this, my favorite thing here. You can see right here, here's where it shows in the score sheet batter block, there's a put out detail. So if you click in there, you'll get the put out detail pop up. And that's what this pop up form here is. So here is strictly just a way for you to conveniently put in how they got out on the base paths. So here you could say, oh, this was from 9 to 5 if it was a straight shot from the right fielder. And that way you'd know how this guy got out on the base paths. And if you wanted to, you could put, 9 to 6 to 5 or 9 to 4 to 5 if it was a hit the cutoff man or something. That's up to you, how detailed you want. This, if you click down here, it'll build this text, or you could just click up here and write the text yourself. If you, whatever you put in there, that's what it'll use. Again, that's just I would call it a feature that kind of just make your score sheet more thorough to record what happened in your game. Another kind of advanced feature is this miscellaneous base runner note and error. And this is kind of just to gracefully handle stranger scenarios for base runners. You can see here, this Don Clendenin hit a triple. Genially grounded out to fourth, grounded out to second base, but he didn't score on that, but he ended up scoring on this passed ball that happened while Jim Pagliarone was batting, but before he got this single. So he scored on this passed ball. So there's a couple things I'll show here. So one, this UE is the unearned or earned run cell. So by clicking it, it toggles between earned and unearned. And when it's unearned, this will turn from blue to gray. So gray denotes an unearned run. And here's the note field. And if you click in this note cell, this form pops up, and you could either use it to define a fielding error that happened not for the batter, or you could just put in any miscellaneous note. So here I just put in a note that said he scored on a passed ball. So when I put that note in, it kind of fills in this cell with the N and puts the little hover on it. on this hover tip. So when you put your cursor on here, it'll show you what your note is if you wanted to see it. So it's just a way to handle some of the more, I'll say, uncommon situations that happen in scorekeeping in baseball. Here are just a list of some of the many other features of the score sheet. First, I'll show that it does have a way to generate a box score. Over here, you can see it's a pretty old school looking box score. It currently doesn't show their kind of season total of whatever it is. It doesn't tell you that this was Ken McMillan's 7th double of the year. So that's something it doesn't do right now. Maybe in the future it will, I'm not sure. But right now, that's the box score feature. Some other various tidbits about the score sheet. It can handle up to 20 innings. That hasn't been a problem yet, but I may have to add a few more innings if if needed. But so far I haven't had. It has what I call semi-intelligent base runner AI to handle most situations. So it knows by what you record for the batter of how many bases the base runner should move and whether the run might be earned or unearned. It's conservative on that, so it doesn't put unearned if it's kind of unsure. But you can always override it manually to correct it. All the AI results, like whether of both moving runners and assigning earned or unearned runs, can be overridden manually, as I just said. So you're kind of the final scorekeeper or judge. The batting lineup can handle 4 batters or players per slot for the slots 1 through 8. The number 9 slot, you can have up to 8 batters or players. And I say batters or players. You could put in players that don't bat, just because they did occur in the game. But if for whatever reason you are going to run out of the 4 slots, you could always remove somebody who was in the game but didn't bat if you need to. Another feature of the score sheet is it has customizable player ratings, 4 for batters and 5 for pitchers. We'll get into more on this later. It has the optional quick score or shortcut scoring feature that we pretty much already talked about. The quick score feature is just kind of a shortcut scoring, and several game settings that help identify and prevent possible scorekeeping mistakes. And many of these are configured in the game options. But they're pretty much things like, at the end of your inning, do you want it to tell you if your RBIs and runs don't match? Or every time it automatically scores a run for you using the AI base running logic, do you want it to tell you that to remind you that you better check that if it's earned or unearned? Or it'll remind you if, hey, it looks like that was the 3rd out, but you didn't mark it as the end of the inning. Do you want to make that the 3rd out and the end of the inning? So things like that, where it's just trying to help you correct a mistake as you make it, instead of at the end of the game when the stats don't compile because you made a mistake. Another score sheet feature, which is optional again, and can be changed anytime during your season. These couple things are the team colors and the floating scoreboard. So you can see here, I made these, the Pirates and the Giants kind of have their, I'll say, kind of standard or common colors. And it doesn't do anything other than make your score sheet look cooler, I guess, if you want to call it that. But it does gives it a little more pop or bling, or it just looks better, I'll say that. This up here is an example of the floating scoreboard, and that I think has even more functionality, because when you use the floating scoreboard, it hides the scoreboard on your score sheet. I think here's an example of that here, where because I have this floating scoreboard, the scoreboard that's typically between the home and visitor score sheets is hidden. And that just gives you more room, I guess, on your screen to see more of your score sheet. And that's typically what most users want. So you can see it was already hidden there, I guess. But the main reason I use it is just for that reason, just so that I can see more of the score sheet on my monitor. Now let's talk about these custom player ratings. So this is step one, and you configure these using the config sheet. And this is a picture of the config sheet and these big help bubbles that tell you how to use it. But in general, you can configure up to 4 custom ratings for batters and 5 for pitchers. And here I did an example of one for running and the player's arm for a catcher or outfielder, and what their defense is. And similarly, you can do whatever you want for your game for pitchers. But as I've said many times in other videos, I'd only recommend adding any of these if you really think it's going to help your game play. And that's up to you and your game and how you want to play it, of whether it's going to help. I would strongly advise to play some games without any of these ratings before you decide to add them, because you'll probably figure out if you find yourself having to look stuff up or go back to something that if you had it on your score sheet it might be convenient. Maybe that's something you want to put in these ratings. But I wouldn't put things that are, I would say, anything that has to do with the batter, I wouldn't advise, because you're still going to play your game and you're going to be looking at your batter's card or whatever. So you don't really need it in the score sheet if you already have the card that you're looking at. So, but anyway, here's where you would define those, and you can change these also during the season. So it's not something you got to do at the beginning. But once you set them up, here's where you could assign them to your players in your league. So you can see over here on the right, it labels these columns run, arm, and DEF for defense that I created. And this is showing the master player list sheet, and down here this is showing the roster sheet. But this is showing it for a pitcher down here. So you can see here the pitcher columns. Another thing I'll point out here is this X. One reason I have found to use these columns or these ratings is for historical leagues. I use one of them just to indicate which players I don't have. So if you're playing a historical season with as played starting lineups, it's very likely that they're going to have some games where some starters are going to be guys that only played 2 games the whole season that they probably didn't create in your game. So this is the way I just put this X in here, and that way when it loads the lineup, when I see this X, I know that I have to switch out this guy for somebody that I actually have so I can use in my game. So the last step of the player ratings, once you create them and assign them, is then when you load your game into your score sheet, you'll see it adds these columns between the position and the first inning, and it will fill in any of these values for players if they have any. Some players don't have. Every player doesn't have to have every rating. So you can see here, this was a Stratomatic thing for running and a player's arm, and then their defense at their primary position. And over here it's showing for a pitcher. Again, I'll say these ratings are completely optional. You can change them anytime during your season. And I can't say it enough. I just recommend you use them wisely, because it can take a long time to enter all your ratings for 400 players, depending on how big your project is. So you want to make sure that it's a good use of your time. One of the best things about the score sheet, if not the best thing, is the fact that when your game is over on your score sheet, with the click of a button, it'll automatically compute essentially all your game stats. And you can also compute them during the game if you want to. But this kind of shows, where it puts them, or where the home batting stats, the home pitching stats, there's visitor pitching, and up here we don't see the visitors' score sheet and their batting stats. Here in this area, I made a note here where it shows this is where it tracks the errors, and this is the only real fielding stats that GreenFox does track. And even then, it really just, at the start of the game, GreenFox ensures that you have all the positions accounted for, and but once the game starts, GreenFox doesn't care who's playing what position and what inning. And that's the reason it doesn't keep track of fielding stats. So at the end of the game, it can detect errors, but it doesn't necessarily know who committed them. So you can see here in this example, if you could read this small, the Dodgers had 3 errors, and this I believe says SS, then it says 7, which means there was error on the shortstop in the 7th inning, error on the right fielder in the 8th inning, and an error on the shortstop in the 8th inning. And down here, the Cubs had 1 error. The third baseman had an error in the 2nd inning. And you can also see here where it says the Dodgers had 0 pass balls, and the Cubs had 1 pass ball in the 5th inning. So it detects these, and there's some game options that you can set up to have these automatically assigned to the starters in each of these positions, which is going to be right 90+% of the time. But if you have some late inning substitutions and there's one of these kind of players makes an error, you're going to have to make sure those errors are assigned to the right players. So that's one minor thing you've got to do. Another thing, which is indicated over here also, is at the end of the game, GreenFox doesn't try to figure out who got the win or the save or the hold or the loss if the team used more than one pitcher. This is something I may try to put more work into in a later version, but right now, if it's a complete game, obviously GreenFox knows the answers to all those questions. But if there's more than one pitcher, it's up to you to decide who got the win, the loss, the save, the blown save, the hold. And that's part of what this little pop-up form is, when you can click in this column here, which I call these miscellaneous stats, where you can indicate all these things like game started, win, loss, save, complete game, shutout, hold, blown save, game finished. These are all the things. And you don't have to calculate saves. You can decide what things you want to keep track of or not. But GreenFox will automatically compute a quality start using the 6 innings, 3 earned runs or less criteria. So that's, and again, this is just reiterating up here in the red that GreenFox doesn't compute fielding stats. And it detects errors, but it's up to you to confirm that they're assigned to the right players. Here is a view of the GreenFox options. This is really kind of a collage. It's really just a big long list of these 20+ options. But I just tried to kind of take a few different screenshots and put them all together so you could see them. But for the most part, you can use the defaults, but some things you will want to change, and some things are set up for, I indicated which ones are league only, but pretty much anybody using this is going to use some kind of league, but some of them are specific to what kind of a league. Like this one's just for custom leagues. But up here it does kind of say, gives you some tips of, it's strongly suggested you use these certain options are set on just because they help you detect errors. But other ones you'll have to figure out what ones you want to do. And I would say especially If you have a custom league, this number 10 is really important, which is really it's a matter of if you're going to have different lefty and righty lineups, this is an important option that you're going to have to figure out. And a lot of other ones are really just, I would say, helpful, but and this one here is for quick score, whether you want to use that or not. Here's another one, this 16, about whether you automatically want to transfer the game errors to the game stats, and then you can correct any mistakes. That's something I typically do. But something to think about for these game options is if you're getting a message that you find is getting annoying, then there's probably a way to turn it off in these game options. And again, these game options, you can change them every game. You can change them during the game if you want to. So you can keep tweaking these to the way that you want them. Okay, so that's the end of the score sheet. There's a lot going on there. And again, that's why I kind of call it the heartbeat of the whole spreadsheet, because that's where you score your game and generate your stats, which is probably the reason you're even considering using GreenFox. But wait, there's one more thing I want to talk about on the score sheet. And those are some of these buttons that I didn't mention yet, or at least I don't believe I did. We're not going to cover every button, but some of the ones I want to mention here I've numbered. By number 1 there are the zoom out and zoom in buttons. And those work the same way as the zoom, I guess you could say, slider in the lower right of Excel. But what's convenient about these buttons and why I made them for myself was that they work on a 1% at a time when you click them. So with Excel, it's easy to get, 80, 90, 100, 110, and those are easy to get with the Excel feature, but it's a little bit harder and takes a little more dexterity if you want to get 97 or 83, something like that. So these buttons make it easy to get exactly what you want, and you can kind of really fine-tune exactly what you want to be able to see on the screen based on your score sheet setup. So that's what those custom zoom level buttons do. Button number 2, the green one, is select entire score sheet, prep for print to PDF. And what that is a way to, I guess you could say, save or archive your game score sheets as you play them. We'll talk about later with number 4, but GreenFox does some of that already. But in addition to that, another way to save your score sheets is to print them out to an image file or a PDF that lives outside of GreenFox. And what this button does is selects or highlights the entire score sheet and stat cells of the score sheet, which then allows you to go into your print function in Excel. And if you then say print selection and print to PDF, it'll save the used part of the score sheet to a PDF image file. And that's a nice way to create an archived image of your game. Then you can then use that to post on some internet forum or Facebook group or send it to somebody or whatever you want to do with it. But it doesn't live inside GreenFox, but this button is a way for you to easily kind of create an archive of your score sheets as you play them. And if you need to, however you want to save them and name them, it might be easier to go back and find what you're looking for. But that's number 2. Button number 3 here, compute in-game stats, is as simple as what it says. Is during your game while you're playing and keeping score, you can always click this button whenever you want to, and in a couple seconds it'll generate the stats for the game up to that point. Some people like to do that. Number 4, the yellow button, is the load game event log. button. And what happens when you save your game in GreenFox, when you save a league game, is that it saves all the in addition to saving the stats on the stat sheets, it also saves all the information in the score sheet itself into a few columns way off to the right on the schedule sheet. That it's pretty cryptic, so you're not going to be able to understand it, but that's not the point. The point is, it's there in the spreadsheet. So if you wanted to go back and review a game from the past, you could. So that's what that yellow button does. If you clear your score sheet out and say, I want to load a game from a game event log, it'll bounce you back to the schedule and ask you, which game do you want to load? You select the game, and it'll load that game, the lineups, all the subs, and everything that was on the score sheet into the score sheet. It won't load the stats, but you can always regenerate the stats. So you may want to use this if you want to just, look at a game you played for whatever reason. You could use it to make a correction, or maybe you realize that you were doing something wrong in your scorekeeping or whatever. But if you wanted to, you could use this feature to load a game from the past, click the Do Stats button, and assign your wins and losses and pitchers and errors, whatever you wanted to do, just like you were doing it the first time. And then if you saved it, it would prompt you, and you could overwrite your existing stats with the new stats if you made any changes. So that's what that Load Game Event Log button does. So that is using the built-in way that GreenFox kind of archives each saved game, so that you can get at it later and look at it, but it doesn't actually save images, but it saves the data that is in the score sheet that it can be used to generate the stats. Or if you then wanted to, you could load it in there and then print it to a PDF if that's what you wanted to do. So those are just some extra buttons that I wanted to give a little extra explanation on.